Welcome everybody. This is Colin Hobson, and we'll take a look at the use of the ACDC product in action. So ACDC stands for As Constructed Design Certification or Drawing Certification, and what we're doing with this is getting a full digital workflow for creating CAD drawings in a form that contains the GIS data, and you can push it directly into the GIS. And there's a whole lot of steps involved in that, and that's exactly what we'll take a look at today. At the previous webinar we did for Directions Magazine, we also asked this question, and there were a lot of folks on that webinar, and it was, what formats do your customers accept as constructed or as built plans submittals? And this was the result of that. So it's PDFs, CAD drawings. So we're focusing on that 78%, that CAD drawings in this webinar. And that seems to be kind of where the industry is at the moment. The PDF one have another solution for that, but really the focus is on those CAD drawings. So that being said, the agenda is to look at the product, to actually see it in action. That's the core piece. We'll spend a fair amount of time. And I'll start that by focusing on the user experience and then showing you how that works from, if it's all set up, here's how it works. And then we can go and say, look at that from the asset owner experience, because there's two kinds of folks using the product. There are people who want to create drawings and submit them, and there are organizations that want to check the data in drawings, make sure it's configured and matches, and pull that from their CAD drawings straight into their data sets. We'll talk a little bit about 2D and 3D, or CAD and Civil 3D, and then also spend a bit of time just showing data going straight into the GIS, and a mention of returns on investments and why we do this. And that was really the focus of that previous webinar, why we're doing this, what's the benefit. So we've put that at the end. You've probably seen this slide if you've attended any one of these, so I'm going to whip through it, just leave it there. But in essence, the picture is we want to control CAD drawings over here and set those up using standard CAD procedures so that it works for the CAD people. And then we want to do a process in the middle where we validate and check and keep track of submittals. And we do that in the portal, which you'll see and I'll talk about, and get output with full attributed data automatically. And we've reduced this down to really a matter of minutes. So once you've got a drawing drawn, that still takes the amount of time, although we've streamlined a lot of that. You can push that straight through and have it showing in your map within, 5 minutes or even less, depending on the data sets, of course. And that's what ACDC is all about. So it's this directionality from as constructed or as built all the way straight through. So just looking then at the different kinds of users. On this chart, you'll see along the top, it's what we call what the consultant or the draftsperson or the engineering company are doing. They're on the top here, and they can do it by project. And so we've set up our solution to deal with two kinds of customers, the people that are doing it by project or the people that are the asset owners. The asset owners actually control both, because the asset owners obviously get contracts and submittals to them. And that's why we have the portal. So along the top is all about the portal workflow. We'll start there. I'll start here and actually say, well, they're using a drawing. What do they do? How does it work? And how do we get validated and what works there? And then we'll get into the bottom here, which is the asset owners. And they control the definitions, because ACDC is fully configurable. You can define what features, what characteristics, what rules, which workflows, and go all the way through that. So that's just a little overview slide. I'll probably come back to it, because as you set up a configuration, you want to push that into the cloud in the portal. ACDC runs in the Azure cloud. So let's go and look then at the portal. The portal itself builds on a whole lot of different things. So everyone has documents and standards. And often I get people say, well, we don't have a standard. Well, actually you do. If you've got a GIS, then your features are already defined, the rules that you're using, the columns you're using, the domain values even. They say, well, we might not have a CAD standard, and that can easily be remedied, and ACDC can certainly help with that. But there's a lot of data, internal processing guidelines, etc., that go into the base of what it is that you define as this is what we want as the asset owner. So the asset owner is somewhere in the middle, and they really control the configuration. They control the rules of when plans are submitted, this is how they're to be submitted and what's accepted or not. The draftsperson in our solution will use the portal. The portal being that it's 24/7 available, and you can control then what goes with which projects, the toolkits and everything. We'll spend time going through that. And the draftsperson will draw stuff. So let's start here as the draftsperson. And so just working with that workflow, a draftsperson is going to go log in to the portal, which has all been set up and configured, and I'll get to that. they'll download what we call a toolkit. And toolkit's a whole lot of different CAD things. I'll show you the contents of that in a minute for drawing your CAD drawing. And what we want to do is make this a self-serve thing so that when you set up a project in the portal, you can include the toolkit and folks can go to the portal and download it. There's a little thing called attributor. I'll get to that in a minute. But once you have this toolkit set up, and I'll show you all of this right now live, you can then go and draw stuff and then submit that drawing into the portal. And that's what the draftsperson or the engineering company or the per project folks do. Okay, and they submit it. If it fails, of course, they got to go fix it, redraw it, and resubmit it. But once it's submitted, it goes and you can actually flag it. At that point, it fires off a whole set of notifications, and then the data can get pushed back down to the folks there. So let's take a specific look at that user workflow. So you go to the portal asconstructed.com and you log in. So the portal is just a website. So we'll actually go there. So this is the portal here, asconstructed.com. And along the top, in here, there's a bunch of different pages about information that explain essentially a large part of what I've done, what's involved with. If you start here, you can see videos, you can look at project validation. So we actually do set it up. This product's been going about 12 years, 5 years on the portal, Microsoft Azure. We've had over 10,000 drawings validated, over a couple of hundred projects all done. And now we're actually getting engineering companies that use this as their workflow rather than reinventing it themselves. And so they can go on a per project basis and just log in and use that. So just doing the workflow I'm about to show you, but on a per project basis so that it's instead of defining all their CAD stuff internally, they can use these approaches. The enterprise validation is all about what organizations do, and we'll walk through that and show you. If you go to the login on the portal, then this is the business end of the portal. When you go there, it'll take you to validations, but let me just start at the dashboard. So each user, you'll be logged in as your own user. It knows what projects you've been assigned to. So I'm logged in with a very limited scope here just to kind of show you. But this would be, say, this is me, Colin, and I've got access to a sample project here. And what I get is this toolkit. So when I log in, and if I've been invited to the portal, then I can go to this project. I've got an invite. So the asset owner sets up the projects, sends the invites, and those engineering companies then control users within their organization so they can come in here. So what they're going to do is download the toolkit, and the toolkit includes a whole lot of things that we use on the CAD side of the house. There's also documents. We have boilerplates. The standard that I'm using in this demo is what we call NCS UDM. So you'll notice that for doing this entire workflow, you have to do the CAD and the GIS part of it. So you want GIS features, but you need CAD-oriented tools and things like layers and templates and blocks and other things like that so that you can satisfy it. And so what we've done with this, we have an off-the-shelf data model. Now, I mentioned ACDC, fully configurable. You can set up your own features, set up your own layout standards, use your own blocks, make your own menus, all of that. And ACDC really enables that. What I'm trying to show you is, well, how does the user just use it? And to that end, in North America, we've used the National CAD standard as the guideline for all layer naming conventions because we want the CAD experience to be as close to what CAD folks are using right now. We've specifically designed everything to follow that so that it's easy to deploy, because one of the large items of changing the workflow is to get CAD folks to draw drawings with attributes that are GIS ready, and asking engineering organizations to change the techniques they're using within CAD is difficult. So we keep it very much according to standards. So NCS National CAD Standard, we've been in the GIS, particularly the utility space, for 20 years, and we've had off-the-shelf data models for most of that time. So we've just taken all of that and put it into this toolkit, and we've called it a universal data model. And actually, it's the bare minimum that you require for any features, things like you need diameter and material. And that way, it's a good start point for folks to add their own feature requirements, etc. So let's take a look. Then if I've taken that toolkit and I download it, I can come in and look at it. So I'm just going to pull up the toolkit that I'm using right at the moment. So the toolkit is a zip file, and when you download it from the portal, it's going to include a menu, set of documents. So you've got included menus, CAD menus, a whole lot of blocks. You'll see here there's a couple of hundred of them for all the different features, and you're going to have obviously a template. So to get that all set up, you just go in. It's basically you're just in your AutoCAD. So I'm going to be using Civil 3D here. And I'll just show you what I've done there. So let's maximize this. So in the toolkit, all I've done is set my search path to go to that symbols folder and put that at the top of the search path. And in that search path, so here it is here. So I've put this toolkit right there. And it then contains all of that. I've also loaded the menus for this particular setup. So you'll see these, they're actually menu picks. And I'm then using the template. So when the user would do is they go File, New, they go to the specific template. And so the toolkit will have a template and you'll pull that in and hit open. So what we normally do is you'll have a boundary for the project file, but this toolkit includes then all of the layers, the blocks. It's already set to the coordinate system. It's already got a project boundary, which is what this box is. By default, we just set it to the city or county, but usually you'll have it smaller than that. And so you can go in and load that. So let's go and switch to one where there's already some data in it and actually draw something useful. So normally, here's an example of a plan. So this has got 1, 2, 3 phases for a development. I'm going to use that as the basis and we'll draw out a bunch of stuff from here. You'll see this has got water, sewer, storm. This is part of the problem, by the way. When this gets submitted to the city, there's no attributes on these things. No depth, no diameters, no materials. Maybe you've got the layers here. So this is a 12-inch water and you've got some numbers. And if you pull this in using the, pretty good tools in GIS products to load a CAD drawing, but you still get sort of dots and lines. So that is changing with full use of GeoBIM and Civil 3D kind of things and model-based, where there's a lot more attributes on the data. But if it's regular CAD, and I'll talk a bit about the mixed hybrid of 2D regular CAD versus model entities in a bit. But there's essentially, stuff's in text, it's all leader lines, or it's like that. So what you want to do is, if you load up in the ACDC workflow, if you're going to look at that, let's go to, say, this one here. So here's the appropriate template. And if we look at the layers, that's already a basis for you to use it. So these layers come and are set up so that the CAD user is guided to split their features into feature classes so that you don't get a lot of points on a line feature, a lot of lines in a point feature, and the polygon things are in their own layers. And so a lot of folks have this, but what you want then is a layer set up. And so we have off the shelf where you can do this, but ACDC allows you to match the GIS to this. And so that's very, very useful. And so you can go in and look at it and use these layers. The problem here is, by the way, if you tell a CAD person, hey, here's a whole new set of layers, and yes, they are National CAD standard compliant with the guidelines. So it's got the discipline, then the major, minor, minor, and you'll see a little bit of GIS stuff in there where lines have got LN for line and points are points and text is text and polygons are polygons. So we kind of split this up. And if you look at the National CAD standard, this is the United States National CAD standard. This one is based on version 6. But if you look at that, they actually have a great setup on here's how drawing deliverables should be structured, named, the paging, the use of XREFs, the document names, etc., and a whole lot of blocks. Most of them are building oriented, very little on utilities, about 40 out of the hundreds of blocks they provide, about 40 of them on utilities. So if you're in the utility space like this, then you're going to have a challenge. But the guidelines are wonderful, and so you can use that. There's just some things, but having a template where you can go to a company and say it is National CAD standard guidelines, self-explanatory, no problem, is very useful. And so that's what we've done by default to set this up. So the first thing you're going to do when you go into ACDC is you need to draw stuff. Now, if you need to draw a line, it's regular CAD. You can just go line or P-line command and you can draw it. But you need to have it on the right layer for that particular feature. So you need to know that a water pipeline is going to be on a CU water pipe LN layer, and you're going to need to draw it. So I could just go in and type in line or P-line or use my CAD stuff to draw things and put it in there. But that's difficult. So what we do with ACDC is we actually also provide, and the system itself allows you to build these out really easily, and I'll show you that in a minute. But we provide in the toolkit a whole set of menus, and you just load that menu. You just type menu load and pop up those menus. So in this example, this is actually a modification of the National CAD standard that we were using, and features have been defined for this particular user. So they've got water, they've got reuse. And so these menus allow the user to just use the menu. It's just a macro. All it does is basically say, create a line on this layer. But the wonderful thing is it now becomes self-explanatory. So in my example, I'm actually going to go in and draw this telecom data right here. So, and I'm just going to build it out. So we've already put some in. And by the way, this here, if I just walk through it in this particular project, I showed you this. Those have been, when they're drawn, normally what happens is the drawing set is a set of XREFs. We want in model space the actual asset. So we would split these either as the utilities being separated from the cadastral, or we'd have one drawing for each of the utilities. It doesn't really matter if the utilities are one of the same. Here in this particular setup, we've drawn the water. So if I go here, here's the actual water from that plan that you saw, but it's been drawn with ACDC standards, and I'll go in and actually draw some and show you. But now these are blocks, and they have all of the parameters on the blocks. They're just standard AutoCAD blocks, right? You see, they've just got attributes and stuff there, and you can go fill it in. We do tie that in with Civil 3D. We tie in those attributes to the property sheets on Civil 3D objects so that you can map it all back, and you can deal with a hybrid where you've got CAD and or GIS Civil 3D objects within the same drawing. So that's what water would be. And then if I went to the other drawing, so in this case, they've been split. So here's the sewer for that setup, same thing. So you'll see the blocks have attributes, all of them. And that's what we're using as the sort of mainstay of the solution is attributed blocks. So even on a line feature, the line is just a line, but the block that goes with it, we associate it and we snap it to a specific point on that line so that you can then add those attributes. So if I click on this block, you'll see that it's got a whole lot of attributes on it, all of the start and ends so that you can get a topological network. And then if you go in on the nodes, we've got depth and size and internal reference for this project. Say sometimes in this project to say, oh, there's 20 manholes and this is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And so these can come from the profile data or whatever. But in essence, you want to draw that. So let me go without further ado then and go and draw that. Now, typically there's also a context within which you're drawing it. And you'd often have a base map and or surfaces. So I'm just going to go in and attach a DWG here, which has the parcels for this thing. And we'll just load that up quickly. We can use its location. So this is just standard CAD stuff, right, that we're drawing with. And so now you'll see this is the parcels, and so that's water, sewer, and storm was all aligned with this. And what I'm going to do now is add a walk through this. So what you do with the ACDC is you walk through essentially the menus. And so in the menu, there's a thing called a common block. We do this to capture data that is common for all features in this project. So here it is, it's a common block, and it's just got, in this case, and once again, fully configurable. You could add many more attributes, but at least you need the contract year, number, date, and created by or whatever. So that's what's going to get it. And we've set up now all these features to apply that data across the board to all of these. You can select them only certain features. Maybe you only want it on the line features, maybe you don't. So the other thing we've got then is that on the menus, typically they're grouped down below. Here's the project boundary. And if it's a point feature, then it's a block. If it's a line, it always has a linear feature like conduit, would have a block that goes with it to carry the attributes. If it's a polygon, it'll have a boundary and a block to go with it that has the attributes. So what we've got then is a polygon like this is the project boundary for this phase of the telecom work. It has a block here, which contains essentially just the name, nothing more. And then there's a whole lot of linear features for the actual data. So I'll show you that right now. So those linear features are like this, and you've got handholds and manholes and fiber, etc. And let's go in and actually draw some, because that's kind of what you probably want to see. So the way we do that, I just left a space here. I'll add in from there to there, and I'm just going to do that. So I can go in and say, let's add the conduit. When I do that, you'll see it automatically has switched to the appropriate layer, and it's automatically set to the appropriate snap mode. So I can go in, you'll notice I can also draw a line. It's drawing a P line, so I've got the capability for drawing an arc. I'm just going to, well, it looks like I've got ortho turned on. Let's turn that off. Standard CAD stuff. So you can go there, and then we say, oh, I want to do an arc, and we can draw that to match up there, like so, and then continue with a line. And I'll just snap it. I'm just following this line basically here and put that in. And then when we're done, we've drawn it, right? Now, if you submit this to ACDC now, this is going to fail because that's just a line on a layer, which is really useful. At least we know it's a conduit, but there's no attributes to go with it, and there's nothing on its end. We want to check that everything is terminated, or if that's a rule, and you can set up those rules. So as I mentioned, anything that needs attributes assigned with it, if it's not a point, by definition, points are going to have that. We can go in and put the conduit block. So if I take this one and I say, you know what, I'm going to snap. So one of the setups was that any midpoint, so I could put it there, I could put it in the midpoint of the arc, I could put it there, any midpoint on any segment of this line, I could go in and put that and snap it. So you'll notice, by the way, there's all sorts of stuff there, but let's go find the midpoint on that there. Snap it. It's going to ask for scales and prompt you the usual thing when you insert a block. So all this did, that menu pick, was get the right layer, get the correct block for that feature, which is nice because you can just read it, and then set the snap mode and you can prompt it. And so now I can come in and say, all right, I've snapped it there and I'm going to rotate it here. And you can use all of your snap modes and whatever. And it now pops up a thing called Attributor. And Attributor is a tool that we've set up that takes essentially your GIS definition with all of the drop downs with the features and allows you to do this. And I'm going to say OK here, and it's going to tell me, hey, these things were required. I'm going to come back to this dialog just to show you. If I had done an insert for a block, so if I just do a block insert, right? The AutoCAD dialog box, if you're familiar with it, has no guidelines. There's no drop downs, there's nothing, right? And it's not that useful. So this block, I can just go to it. I can go back at any time and I can edit that with Attributor, right? And so what Attribute does, and you can do one or more blocks, but basically it puts down the tag description. So these are standard AutoCAD block. If you looked at the block, actually, you know what? If I go to this block here, I can do an ATTR edit here, and I select this block, you'll get the AutoCAD dialog box. You see that? So this bottom one is just for formatting so that it looks nice, but these are the actual things, and it's free format. There's really little guideline, and this is a good way for capturing data to go for GIS. It's a really bad way of controlling what gets put in anywhere, and to that end is pretty useless. Also, this block is a standard AutoCAD block, right? So you see these block tags, yeah. So that's what we're using. So let's go in and edit that with Attributor. So it's a free plugin. It's on the Autodesk App Store. You can download it. It works with AutoCAD and BricsCAD. But now it takes the lookups and I can say, okay, this is an HDPE and this is the diameters, and we can put in whatever values there. So let's say it's a 2 count and say it has, so that'll probably just give it, let's say it's a 24. You can put in a reference, you can add additional notes. So this stuff, and getting this to match your GIS is really quite complicated and detailed, and ACDC has tools for achieving that fairly easily. A lot of automated. So now that's an attributed block. It's snapped to the midpoint of the line. When you run the validation in ACDC, it's going to apply that to this guy here. I'm going to go in on this end here and also put in a block, but I'm going to fail to put in certain values, okay? Let's say there's a handhole on the end of this. So you'll see it's pulled the block, and I'm going to snap it on here, and we can do the scale factor will be 1, and you can rotate it or not. And it's going to put in and say size, and I'm going to leave that out. So say I was not using attribute and it didn't show me that this was mandatory and that slack loop length was mandatory. I'm going to leave that, and it's going to prompt me, by the way, that you need these, okay? And then I'm going to save this drawing, and I'm going to go in and validate the drawing quickly to show you how that does. So I don't want to spend all the time on all the CAD nuances, but you get the point that line features need an attributed block, blocks need their own stuff. So there's a handhold with the properties. So it's a 20 inches, 20 feet, 20 slack and the size and whatever. But this drawing is going to fail because I've set that up. And you can have all sorts of things in the rules that we check. I'll talk about that in a minute. So we actually advise that you detach the XREF before you submit the drawing. So I'm going to do that quickly. You can do it off the XREF dialog. You can do it from here. And let's go and save this as something else. This is RD, so that's fine. I'll just save that for now. And then we can go in and take this drawing and pop it straight into the portal. So I'm logged in. When I log in, it shows me my validations. And on validations, I can go submit new. So it knows what projects are valid for me. And I'm going to go in and actually find that drawing and put it in here quickly. So you can actually see and watch here. So this is working. This is the drawing I just saved. This one here, D. So there's the time and the date. We pop that over. We just drag and drop it. It picks it up. I go in and I actually put in a description for myself. Let's say it's that one there, and we'll change that to D, like so. And let's say it's the first submission and it's a revision 1. And I've got a particular project for that particular thing. I'm just going to stick this under training or test, and off we go and we hit submit. So what the validation is going to do is it's running a whole back-end process. So the first step is it gets uploaded. So this is the line item here to watch this guy. And so you'll see as it runs, it'll go in and run through the status. So it's uploaded, the icon will change, and you'll see it track. While that's busy there, and it will come back. I do expect it to fail. If it fails, we're going to see this. So I've gone to one where we tested it before. It says, look, you've got 5 errors. We'd expect I'm only going to have 1 or 2 errors on mine. And it gives you some stats, and we'll come back to that. So let's just refresh this, make sure that that's all up to date. And that guy's going to fail here. So it's uploaded, opened, and processing. And then it's going to actually then give you, when if a drawing fails, you get a log that you can download. Okay, so you see there it's processing and validating and running through the procedure, and now it has failed. Okay, so it's just updating all of the stats, and there we go. So that's loaded up to Microsoft Azure Cloud. We blob the drawing, we run a back-end processing on it, and it's using all of the rules, things like what columns are mandatory, what are the domain values, was it snapped? And so here we can see the 2 errors, and this thing ran just for a short period, and it passed. So at this stage, I can say, well, hang on a minute, what's wrong? So I want to download the failed drawing. So it's going to go in, pull that, download it. I can go in and open that folder. And in this folder here, there's a zip file there. The zip file actually, if I open it, will give me a log. Let's look at the log actually. It's quite useful. The log is a list. It shows you actually exactly what the problem is. It'll flag what the problem is, and then it'll say, okay, you've got an error here, you're missing a mandatory value. And so the 2 things are the errors are listed consecutively, and it actually gives the coordinates and lists exactly what's wrong. But this is, more than you'd expect someone to read through this list. But it's useful to have a list because actually then the asset owners have a record of what was wrong and the processing, and it says what the coordinates was and everything else. But the more useful thing is to go in and look at the drawing here. So I'm going to take this guy here and just drag and drop it into my working folder and rename it for that purpose, right? So let's go into the working folder here and just pull in that zip file thing there. Okay, so we'll put that here. I'm just going to make a new folder so that it doesn't try and overwrite the one that I even have that drawing still open. Let's just say they did not pass. Okay, and we'll put that drawing in that space there. So we can just take this whole thing, drag and drop it over there. And so now I'm going to go and open that drawing. We can take a look at it, and I'll show you how we flag those errors. So let's go drawing open and go find that thing. So this is the failed drawing. And I actually kind of like to rename them just so that you know. And then there is a workflow here as well. You can decide, do you download that one and reuse it, or do you keep your original and you look at this one side by side and you actually see what it is. So what we've done in this is we flag the drawing and put errors down. So you're going to get a set of errors. They're going to be either red markers or yellow. So you'll see here, if you look at the drawing, at the thing, we actually have errors geometry, errors attribute, and then there's also spatial and database extent errors. We just add a circle block on that layer so that you can click on it and zoom to it and go find them and fix it. And literally here it is telling you what we saw in that thing, but it's saying that the select length is a mandatory tag value and handle size is a mandatory tag value. And so you could go fix this. So at this point, we would want to fix it. So I'm not going to fix it in this drawing. I'm going to fix it in the one where I was working, and then go into this guy and go fix it, and then resubmit it and be done, right? So that's essentially how you draw it, how you fix them. Well, I guess let me go fix that and then I'll resubmit it over here. At this point, I could use attributor. I could go in here and just put in some values. I happen to know this is a text column, and I happen to know this is numeric. So let's just say there was a 21, and I've put those in. You'll see the block has set to display some of the attributes, but not all of them. And that's also part of the setup. What do you display? What don't you display? I did also notice that the layout thing had a viewport, and we kind of actually want to get rid of that, but that's fine. And so this drawing, we would expect it to pass, and let's go and just save it. So this is RD, go to the portal, and I could actually say, you know what, I want to resubmit that drawing now that I've fixed it. So resubmit, and then it keeps a bunch of the information. We change this to submission 2, and we drag and drop that drawing straight into this. We don't want the downloads, we want the one to pass. So let's go and find this one here. So working, and this drawing here. So this could have a bunch of different utilities in it. I could do the water and the sewer and the storm, etc. So I add that in, I submit it, it'll run away and go and do it. And then I'm going to move on. We can come back. But I did run this with the original F drawing that passed. So let's just see what that looks like while we're waiting. So here is the drawing, same version, same thing. I just drew that, but it's passed. You'll see there's 10 conduit lines, the length, the median, the count, how many, there's 7 handholds, 3 manholes, etc. We track feature classes that were not submitted, that could have been, you've got errors, passed, etc. At this point, this person can go in and say it's ready for review. So remember, I'm the engineering company that's drawn the drawing. I'm the CAD draftsman that has the login through that company. Loaded the drawing, go in and say it's ready for review. When I put that it's ready for review here, it'll now say it's successfully submitted. And you can only do ready for review once you have a valid drawing. And so what that guy is going to do then is actually load it up and start a whole workflow in the portal that pushes to the organization to say this is now ready to go. And that's sort of how that workflow works. And you can see that. So that's the CAD thing in terms of drawing all of that information and building those things out. So pretty slick to create those. And so all these drawings that I've shown you have been validated, passed versions of them have been passed for water, and telecom, and a few other, and actually the parcels as well. So let's go and look at the rest of that workflow quickly. And then the output of this, let's go to the presentation here. So the hands-on user experience, we did a login, we got the toolkit, we set that up. There are data definitions, so there's a whole set of documents that outline the data. There's using attributed blocks and with data, and that information, that valid drawing, by the way, has all of the attributes associated onto those features, including the attribute information. So this is what you saw, the output, and we've done that user experience. So the same thing applies for the ACDC Desktop. So remember I said you create it as a user for the drafting. You can do that on the desktop as well. You'll also use the attributor, and in the desktop you can actually do the validation yourself as opposed to doing it in the portal. You can do this whole thing in the desktop. So let me go and show you then and step to that in ACDC. I think it comes up in the next slide. Yeah, so the ACDC Desktop, I'll show you that right here. So if we go in here, I've turned off the ribbons so that you didn't see them, they were not distracting. But if you're on the desktop and you're using ACDC in that mode, so I've shown you this workflow as outside of an organization. Typically inside an organization, you can still work like this, but you can also run in the desktop over here. So let's start looking a little bit at the desktop. So the desktop itself, the ACDC Desktop is an AutoCAD application that you install and load on top of your existing AutoCAD, Civil 3D, Map, even vanilla AutoCAD. It includes its own menus, but what the desktop does is you can do the drawing and submit like we've just done. But you can also do all of the configuration because you can have your template open, your blocks open, and you can connect to your GIS and look at what the features are, what's available, and define all of those things and where they go and start defining all the rules and the details. So now all of a sudden, this thing becomes really quite powerful. So it is the workstation for doing work. It's also the workstation for doing configuration. And when you've set a configuration here, you can push it into the portal and assign it to a given project. And so that's kind of where we're at. So let me show you a little bit of that then. So in the desktop here, as I said, I turned off the ribbon. So let's just type in ribbon, turn it on. So I'm now in ACDC. It has its own ribbon. It stores the configurations in a database, so you can connect. It allows you to configure stuff. It allows you to validate. So I could take this drawing right here and hit validate, and I just select the CAD drawings in the drawing and it'll validate here right and now. The same back-end process that's been run in the portal get run on your desktop, and because it's got the definition of all of the rules. You can then also go in and define and set up how you connect to your GIS. This off-the-shelf version is using FDO. We're also capable of pushing REST services straight into various GIS things. We can output into QGIS, you can output into SDE databases. From the portal, you can have, obviously there's a lowest common denominator there that creates shapefiles, but you can also view that in a DWG viewer, which we will be loading straight out of that portal, and online if you have that option as well. So ArcGIS Online. I'll show you that in a minute. Let's just walk through this. So the configurator is really the intelligence engine where you set up everything. And to do that, you need a drawing with all of the layers, which I've shown you here, and the blocks already in that drawing. And we help you set up the blocks, and we look at the rules to link blocks, the geometry of blocks, and create all the attributes based on the data definitions. I'll show you that just now. So configurator itself is a full-blown application, and so it starts with the blocks. So you'll see there's attribute blocks, and then there's just plain graphics if you just want line work. There's all sorts of integrity rules that you can apply, tolerances. There's a bunch of settings that you can see, things like what's your colors used, what's the coordinate system, where's the project, drawing names, etc. All of that sort of versioning. You can set up your connections to external data sets, to Esri. Let's go into the heart of the matter. Let's look, say, at, I don't know, what I'll take, natural gas. Here we go. So here, if I click on this block, you need to set up on the block which columns in the common block it's using, what the attributes are. And so first, let's actually go to the object. So a gas pipeline can either be a CAD line or a polyline. It has to be on a specific layer, and this is the block associated with it to carry the attributes. So you'll see down here, there's a definition. We actually then have the definition of the table that it creates and output, and also the snapping. So there's a bunch of different things there. And then for each attribute, you can go to that attribute, and I'll click on a simple one like diameter. On each attribute, you're going to say, what's the block name, what's the attribute in the block, what's the data type in the block. Now, what we're doing there is all attributes in AutoCAD blocks are basically just character fields. But when we do the validation and output on validation, we're moving that out of attributes on blocks into object data, and object data can have data types. So we'll check if it's real, and you can look at range and mins and maxes. You can also assign domain value tables, so what we call a lookup table or domain value, and the destination column within the object data. And then you can put external output, you can create, and we'll populate a asset management system at the same time. So there's a lot here on these definitions, and this thing allows you to go in and click on each one within the context and helps you then set up your CAD drawing, your templates, your blocks, and you can validate whether your validation is good. And this is stored in a database so that you can then push that further up. So I'm going to go fairly quickly to show you a few things here. So the asset owner experience. So if you're the asset owner, yes, your internal engineering staff and CAD folks can draw plans and submit them with the desktop, just like I've shown you. But you're going to manage the portal itself. So in the portal, if you're administrator, you can go in and manage your organization, developers, projects, document sets to go with it, and build all of that out. So for example, you can manage projects. So this particular customer has a whole bunch of different projects. They've got due dates. They're assigned to one or more different developers. Those developers have got logins, and you can track it, and you can track the toolkit that goes with that given project, right? You can also set up workflows where you're dealing with what happens when it's ready for review, where does it go after you've accept or reject, what happens to failed drawings, and you can actually deal with those workflows. So when you look at the asset owner configuration, there's a bunch of things the asset owner does. So if you look at these lanes, so there's just data and documents at the bottom, but the asset owner and the drafters, we've done the drafting and the creation. But actually when you're doing configuration, you kind of work backwards. We drew stuff and then validated. But when you're setting it up, you want to look at, well, what is it we want in the data set? So your GIS schema and standards, asset registers, rules, things like, do we absolutely need material? Do we snap? Does a manhole need to be checked that it actually touches a pipe? Do you have, a range of values controlled? All of that stuff, all of that you can set up. So you're going to look up what we call a validation set and a CAD toolkit. As the ACDC Desktop product allows you to build these things. And this is the heart of the matter, defining your features, the attributes, the domain values, attribute and spatial rules. And we support a bunch of different spatial rules. They can be proximity rules, touching rules, tolerances for snapping, automatic breaking of lines, etc. So you're going to set up things like the notification set, In other words, the workflows and the projects documents that go with any given project. Once you're ready with all of these, you can pop them into the portal and then invite people to join it. So that's the workflow, and it then fits in and supports all that we've seen already. So a lot of work here, and I'll just go into a few of the things. This define, configure, that's actually the hardest part, or one of the hard parts. And we'll just look at that a little bit. There's various interactions here as well. So in terms of data definition, if you're the GIS person, you're going to have a feature type, it's going to have a name, it's going to be a point, line, polygon feature, it's going to have columns, and there's going to be data types on those and various things, and maybe domain tables, and maybe the snapping rules or data rules like range of values or things like that. And I've just put in a point feature and a line feature as a simple example that you would want to know to build out a validation set. But you need to marry this with the CAD requirements. So let's look at the CAD requirements, because this is what you want to be able to start with this. If this is what you want as the final repository of data and what you want to check, what you want to do is easily set up the CAD person for success. So here's what the CAD person wants. They're going to want to know. So if it's still same two features, let's say for a natural gas valve, they're going to need a layer name. And so it's one feature. I've just listed them for every column. So it's just one feature, valve. It snaps to the ends. It has a block name of this. It also gets common block information of the contract year. These are mandatory or not. We actually then automatically set up the block so that you can set whether you want to display that tag or not. You'll see this one's got 3. So what actually shows automatically there, and even the position of where that tag is, we code certain positions. If it's a point, usually it's sort of the upper left. If it's a line block, you typically have something, which is a combination of diameter and material, which is going to be above the block and something below. So that's what these tag positions mean, and descriptions. So these descriptions is what's going to show in the block in Attributor, for example. And then this is the order. So normally we put the ones that are mandatory in the beginning and then we roll them out. So all of this is used as you do your configuration sets. You also want to know on those menus what happens there. So in that configurator, I showed you this, but here now I'm on a gravity pipe. So it can be a line or a polyline. We know what layers, we know what the block name is. And on the block, we have these attributes that are assigned, and they have certain values. In configurator, you can also switch into menu mode. And that'll then take those blocks and features and you can define them and start building out the menus like this, because that's, this is standard AutoCAD. The menus are output are standard AutoCAD menus. However, to create them is a little finicky. And this is very, very useful because this is useful to create. So you can go to the menus, add items, drag and drop them into these groups and assign them, and then go in and look at the actual features. We can set up menus for just plain AutoCAD or with Attributor, because that says when you insert a block, instead of using the block insert, you use OS block command, the OS being Open Spatial. There's also BricsCAD that we support. So there's 4 or 5 different kind of menus you can just push the button for. And you can go in then and set up for this given menu text entry in that group, it's this feature. So this is out of configurator. And then there's even a preview of this is actually the code that it's going to create in those menus. So if you're deep into AutoCAD, you'll understand that that's actually all you need to do. You could have done that manually by hand and gone in and entered those requirements that says basically set the layer on a P line and then put that in. And so you go, and we use a command called Attributor. So just builds it out, and then you get a menu that looks like this. And so in the off-the-shelf data model, we got civil, electrical, sewer, storm, telecom, water, natural gas. You'll see that in the civil national CAD standard, they put natural gas and fuel oil and civil site and a bunch of stuff as just civil. So we've got those in there, and so I can go into that in detail. But Attributor, for those that were interested in it, you can configure it with text files. But from the configurating, we can run the output to automatically take those definitions and create the 2 definition files that are used by Attributor. There's just 2 text files, or you can compile them to ATR files if you don't want to give away your schemas. But it flags things that are mandatory, puts in what the drop downs are, adds descriptions and all of that, and I've showed it to you. And so when you're using it, here's an example using a thing called ASpec or WSpec. It's an Australian standard. So ACDC supports multiple standards. You can configure your own as well. And it's got, all these tips, and you can put in the blocks and build it out with Attributor. And then there's 2 simple files for Attributor, the definitions and the domains. And if you're really interested in that, and I'm going to go fairly fast because there's a lot of info here, But there's the definitions, which says this is the feature type. These are the columns. Are they mandatory or not? And do they use a lookup table? If they do, then it pops that up and says in the domain column, there's a corresponding definition. And this is all documented online in the Autodesk App Store. Actually, you can read the description, and see, this is all described in this product documentation. But basically, those two files support this guy, so that there's a feature called water hydrant. It has a column called usage. It has a domain value called WA usage. And that one is defined to have these drop downs, and that's how they appear over here. And it's mandatory, so it gets a little asterisk next to it. So fairly simple, and there you go. So that's how that works. Workflows, I mentioned that, I showed you that just a little bit. It allows you to set up this so that when that thing is for review, you can set up where it goes and what happens and that sort of thing. Okay. Outputs, let's go and actually look at that live. It's much more exciting than looking at it standard. So here's that data that we just validated and pop those in. And so this is what that sample area, and maybe we can actually turn the base map to just a very simple topographical. Here you can see we've taken for these various developments, I've loaded up some sample data. But if you go and look at that data and pop, say, onto a pipe, you'll see that it's got the attributes. It's got from the common block, the year and the contract number, and it's got information, PVC, etc. It's also been snapped node to node. So if I zoom in there, you'll see the valves are on the pipes there, and their insert point seems a little off, but it is on the pipe. There you go. And then it's got all of the attributes that go with it. It's been validated, and let's go and look then also maybe at the telecom that we already looked at and built up here. So you can see, and it's got the polygon area for the project area, and then if you click on a given telecom, it'll pop up the properties for that. And so this is one of 14 different things that drill down at that point. But the telecom there, the handhole and the slack length, and so it goes, right? You can look then at the water node. All of this is now great stuff that's really in a matter of minutes get pushed straight through into your map, and it satisfies your GIS requirements, and off you go. I do mention, so there's these big blocks. The desktop covers in-house, hands-on in CAD and validation, but also configuration. The attributor with the toolkit does for drawing, and then the portal does a whole bunch of work there. And so these things highlighted in blue would be the sorts of things that the asset owner would put together. The attributor thing, configuration for ACDC, the toolkit, portal account, and obviously the input and output for what the definitions are and where the data goes. And so that then allows for this build out. So they go for the CAD drawing, validation, put in the portal. If it passes, you can then pop it right into GIS, and it'll notify people. You can see it in an Autodesk viewer from the portal. You can pretty much just pop that out if you have that option available, and if you have an Esri Online account, you can then view that data there. And we could even load up into digital twins. So that's sort of start to end ACDC, hands-on. Last thing to mention is the benefits. So we did surveys over time with various customers that we have, and really there's two things. So this is taking large and small organizations and putting their numbers together. So there is a margin of variance on these, but the trend is absolutely clear. You're going from, it took a while, to very quick turnaround, and the level of confidence has gone from not that great to very close to very confident on data. And we averaged that out, just by the way, the number of projects done and what was estimated before and after for the average of that group. So once again, you need to look at the stats of who that group is. But seriously, it's hundreds of processing days saved per year per organization. That's a no-brainer. Is this very efficient? Absolutely. Does it pay for itself? In short order, absolutely. So ACDC, comprehensive solution for full electronic workflow. All right, thank you, everybody.